Alright, what's up YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel, and I want to talk about conspiracy theories. I love online video game conspiracy theories, and as a game designer, I'm always incentivized to find out what companies are doing to try and balance a game for their customers. This is just a post that I happened to find that was kind of that specific kind of rhetoric, and I will read it out for you because people are worried that the Pokemon TCG Live is rigged in the same way that Magic Arena was proven to be rigged. And we'll dive into that in a little bit. But the text is, Amazonian just posted a video on YouTube with proof that the matchmaking system on Magic Arena runs an algorithm to give weight to certain cards, meaning that the game literally chooses opponents based on your deck's perceived power level. I'm wondering if Live might do the same. Is there a hell queue on Live as well? Are we being algorithmically shuffled into games against weakness or bad matchups? Just how random is the shuffling? Is this why it sometimes feels like the game wants you to lose? These are things I wonder now that the curtain has been lifted on Arena. Are we playing a rigged game too? Now, I have a lot of experience playing both on PTCG Live. Pokemon TCG is my current hobby. And also Magic Arena. I am a reformed Magic player. I've played Magic for like 20 years and no longer own cardboard, but now I just play on Arena for fun because, hot take, I actually really like the alchemy cards, and it's really the only place you can kind of mess around with that kind of stuff. But also, it's just, I'm curious to keep up with what Magic is doing after all this time, because Magic is the one game a game designer needs to learn for any kind of situation or skill. Now, I want to talk about a couple of different things, but the first one that's going to kind of lean into maybe explaining some stuff is personal first-hand experience. I've played on Arena a lot and Pokemon TCG Live a lot, and the algorithms that run both games are very different because both games run very differently. But the main sentiment here that I'm trying to conquer is why are companies incentivized to make their games have so many non-games? I'm talking scenarios where it's just unplayable, you're stuck in a state where you're just spectating your opponent playing the game. This happens to me a lot in Pokemon TCG, in person as well as online, and not so much in Magic, but Magic has a separate different problem. So let's start with Magic Arena, shall we? I am currently ranked Mythic. I don't really grind for ranked, but I never play not ranked when it comes to playing Arena. I'll just kind of throw it on there. If I'm, playing a brew, it's some goofy shit. Maybe it goes well, maybe it doesn't. I don't really care about my rank. And so I get like really close to Mythic, and then maybe I'll bust out a few more serious games. For this season in particular, I started off playing a lot of Timeless. I want to play with some of the new cards. There's a new saga that came out with the Aether Drift alchemy cards that I just think is really cool and has some cool synergies with the other cards that I like. And so I played a whole bunch of that. And then I realized that that whole deck could just be played in Historic with worse lands, and I don't have to deal with stuff like Balustrade Spy winning the game on turn 2 or, that kind of stuff. So I'm like, okay, I'll go on, I'll try Historic instead, and then I creep up the ladder a bit more. And then I go, you know what, actually, I'm feeling a bit out of touch with the stuff that's released recently. I didn't really play that much through Duskmourn. I didn't really play that much through Bloomburrow. Let's play Standard. And I just go to MTG Top 8. I rip off a Standard deck list to go, hey, this is kind of the archetype that I want to play. And I'm playing White, Red, Aggro, Mice. And you could probably go and find the exact deck list that I ripped. And I'm playing this basically just for the last 10 matches to get to Mythic, because that's just kind of how close I was. Now, this deck list is really interesting to me because it's white and red. It has a pretty good mix of spells in both colors, but there's only 4 lands that tap for a single color. Now, in the first 7 of those 10 games to get to Mythic, my lands are fine. I have some pretty good games. If I'm going first, I usually have a 1-drop and a 2-drop that I can play out, and things curve out kind of fine. And I'm not mulliganing super often, and if I am, it's not really a big deal. It's not super detrimental. Games 8, 9, 10, my hand is double mountain after mulligan, both times. So opening 7, double mountain. Opening 6, double mountain. And my entire hand is only white spells. Now, for this to happen once, I go, hey, yeah, that's random, that's fine. For this to happen 6 times in a row, and then me to consecutively also be playing into blue-black control, which just has 4 creature removal spells in their opening hand, you go, okay, maybe they're incentivized for me to not make Mythic, because if I'm really close and they think that I'm the kind of player that really wants to get to Mythic, the longer they push me away from my goal, the more time I'm logging into the game, the more games I'm playing, the more likely I am to spend money on wild cards and get new stuff and upgrade my deck and continue to push through, which is obviously an incorrect analysis of my character. I'm just trying to get to Mythic just because I'm close to it. If I was really far away from it, I'm just still mindlessly playing ranked. I don't really care. And also, I only switched to standard because I was trying to, play around with the format. And after hitting Mythic, I went and just brewed up some junk stuff and I kind of played that. But I just get to have that nice accolade now. I'm like, cool, I did it, now, recently, instead of whenever the last time I was Mythic. And so it's interesting feeling like, yes, this is a wall constructed to defeat me rather than a random shuffle. And I've had millions of conspiracy theories about the land and spells, and it really doesn't feel like a conspiracy when it's very, very common that you will get stuck on 2 lands, regardless of the number of lands in your deck. In Timeless, because we have Chrome Mox now, I'm playing 16 land and 4 Chrome Mox, and I'll still get stuck on 2 land for the entire game and not draw anymore. You play 24 land in something like a standard deck, and then you get stuck on 2 land and you never draw anymore, even with card draw. And it's like, okay, it's invested for me to get far enough into a game to think that it's playable and then never get any further than that. And it's like you said, analyzed millions of games to actually check what it's like. But from first-hand experience, when something happens, you go, okay, that sucked. I'll go next guy, try again. And then the exact same thing happens. You go, okay, maybe I'll change my deck. I'll put in 38 lands. And then the exact same thing happens again. And you're like, why am I being punished in particular? What have I done wrong? Right? And so it stops being a conspiracy theory and it starts feeling a lot more like a real problem. And then if you go onto any Magic Arena Facebook group, a lot of the posts are either, hey, fuck this user in particular, you were roping. I'm like, okay, I don't really care about that. Or, here's my ridiculous conspiracy theory about the game, the shuffler is rigged, the matchups are always shit, and stuff like that. Playing Historic, when Historic first came out, was kind of my thing. I really like playing the older formats, and so I play a lot of Historic. And when Historic kind of first came out, there was one deck, and that was Mono White Life Gain. You would play a thing that says whenever a creature you control gains life, there's a couple of them now, and then you would play the 2-drop 1/4 that gains 4 life whenever you play an angel, and then you would play the 3-drop 3/3 angel that says if you gain 5 life, make an angel every turn. And it's like, alright, I just can't beat that curve out every single game unless I have 2 pieces of removal, basically. And it was just every deck, to the point where I was playing, I think it's Tainted Remedy that makes your opponent lose life instead of gain life. And no matter what you're playing, unless it would beat that deck in particular, you would always get match made against that deck. And then you start playing something like, I don't know, bigger or better, or whatever the game thinks would beat that thing, and then you would never see it anymore. And then you go, okay, either every single user of the game suddenly changed what deck they were playing, or matchmaking has determined that this matchup is not fruitful for me. And on Arena, it feels way more transparent about that kind of thing. Now, I actually saw a video similar to what they're referencing in this post, but talking about League of Legends, which has that similar sentiment in it, in making you bounce up against your goal to keep you playing longer, and basically said that they analyze the data of the average user, and across you get 3 game opportunities basically, and you are more likely to get a user to keep playing, to keep coming back, if 2 of those 3 games were losses. And in a specific pattern, if you went loss, win, loss, they were much more likely to play a 4th game or to come back later, which is really interesting. In theory, loss, 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 you get, man, this game sucks, I'm not doing any good, my morale is crushed. Loss, win, loss, I guess, has a little bit of optimism in it or something. And so they realize that if this is the thing that's happening, that's making our users come back the most, then we should be incentivizing this to happen to our players as consistently as possible. Looking at something differently, like a gacha game, right? Their monetization strategy is really obvious. They'll release a new character or new content every 2 weeks, and they go, this thing is really good, and it has like a monetary scaling thing, where it's like, as a free user, you can probably get like 1 copy of the character, maybe their weapon as well, if you're really lucky. But if you spend lots of money, you'll get more upgrades to that character, and the stronger they'll be. And then they'll constantly do stuff that will incentivize you to play money by making you play that character at full power and see how crazy it is, or getting you really invested in the character and the story. And League doesn't do any of these kinds of things. The only tool, the only lever that it has to pull when interacting with you, the user, is either having really pretty cosmetics in the store or affecting the results of your games. And sometimes you'll load in and there's a person very clearly tilted, they're on a gigantic loss streak, and they're like in matchmaking, just literally in the lobby, they're like, I'm throwing this game. And you're like, great. I'm the third jungler, I've decided, and they intentionally lose the game. And you go, how could I possibly have won that? It was lost before it even started. And then you get punished if you abandon for that, right? And those kind of things are never going to go away because it's incentivized to give you losses any way that they can to make it balanced out. And that's why when people say when grinding through stuff like League, to succeed and get to a higher rank, you only need a 51% win rate, because anything much higher than that is ridiculous and unrealistic. Especially in a team game when you have to basically win the entire game for your team by yourself, it's a bit crazy. But you can't rely on those things when it comes to card games because it's just you and your opponent. So what can the app control? The shuffler, the main thing. What mulligan is provided to you? How good does it look, or how likely are you to mulligan? That's what I say Magic Arena. I want to talk about Pokemon TCG Live because Pokemon TCG Live is very different. Pokemon TCG Live is not monetized. You can't spend money in the app. You have to buy code cards that come in boosters from third-party sellers to scan the codes to get extra currency to unlock cards in the game. A thing that the developers don't make any money from. So, are they really incentivized from keeping you on the app in the same way? Well, it's unlikely you'll then make purchases, right? So they're not incentivized in the same way. Also, it's just a very different game for Magic. So first of all, you can't mulligan. Your mulligan is kind of determined for you by the cards in your hand. If you have a basic Pokemon or not, then the game goes, yes, this is an acceptable hand, and there some exceptions, but yes, this is an acceptable hand. This is the hand that you have starting your game. Now, the meta at the moment is that setup is like really, really important, and so a lot of cards that help you set up actually, I think, more likely to show up in your opening hand. I see Buddy Buddy Poffin way more than the 1 in 12 chance that playing a 4 of really should denote. And then let's then talk about non-games, because it feels like Pokemon TCG is fine on the setup. Sometimes it'll be a little bit janky. You won't really have any setup cards, and you go, okay, that's supposed to happen some of the time. That's fine. It doesn't feel like all of my games, I open it up and go, here's my basic, I do nothing, and then I get donked. That doesn't actually happen that often, which would be like the rigged Magic Shuffler equivalent, where you go, okay, here's my guy, comes back to me, well, I can't put any second Pokemon on the bench because I have access to none of those cards, which would be a really easy way to force players to lose the game. My opponent just goes, attack for 50, I lose the game. And so, where is the non-game, right? Where is the non-game in the Pokemon TCG? In League, a non-game often is just because someone is toxic and throwing intentionally. I am pretty convinced that there are actually bots that play this game to keep the numbers up for matchmaking, and very often they are support players because I believe that this is the lowest the lowest skill cap role to play. I don't know, you set me on fire in the comments for that one, but I'm a support main, and I've played it into lane opponents that are not humans, for sure. And then, differently, a non-game in Magic the Gathering, the easiest lever to pull for that is having no land, or having lots of land, or just drawing the wrong colors of land constantly. very often when playing a 2-color deck, I found myself never having the right colors that I needed to cast any of my spells. Like specifically, like your hand is, I'm playing a 3-color thing, here's 4 white cards and 3 green-black lands. You're like, fuck. And it feels really curated and specific in some ways. Whereas Pokemon TCG Live doesn't have that problem. But like I said, what's a non-game here? Well, this kind of happens a lot because card draw and consistency is really infrequent in the Pokemon TCG. Some decks, like really heavily, will rely on a supporter, and that can be hard to find sometimes. Professor Starter is a good example. I played a game at my local where I was playing Raging Bolt, and my opening hand was 4 Starter, and I had no way of finding energy despite playing 12 in the deck and having 4 Earthen Vessel and having stuff like Pokestop to potentially put in the discard pile, all this kind of stuff. And I had no way of, turning on that draw supporter. And that happens. There are some games like this where it happens. But because the Pokemon TCG is not... It's designed in a different way from Magic. To use an analogy, Magic is like building out a bridge slowly piece by piece, and you can kind of walk closer to the goal based on how many lands you have, and then like how many things you can do is basically the distance across the bridge that you can make. Pokemon TCG, you will have pieces of the bridge that don't align in any order, and then you have to put them in the right order to be able to cross to the other side of the bridge, basically. Which is the difference in like Magic. You're like, on my first turn, I can only ever cast something that costs 1 most of the time, and that's kind of the limit of what I'm doing. And the second time, maybe I can cost 1 thing that costs 2, or 2 things that cost 1, and then that's how that kind of works. But my TCG on the first turn of most games, both players on their first turn will spend like 10 minutes doing as many actions as possible to try and set up as many things, thin the deck as much as possible, which is crazy. And it means that the easiest way to stop a game from happening is to stop that first bridge piece. Is the only thing that you need to stop. And that's most of the time is just like regular ball search, like Nest Ball, like Buddy Poffin. Potentially stuff like Arven is like really, really common for helping set up in that same way. And it just doesn't feel like the Pokemon TCG is playing with that lever at all. Normally, the thing that I find is losing my games for free is I go, hello, yes, this is the problem I have presented. In this incredibly narrow margin of things that you need to solve it, you need to do this thing. And they go, okay, it was just all in my hand already. And you're like, oh, yeah, that kind of sucks. But I don't know that that's necessarily something that happens to the game. Like, you could only control that if I was playing against a bot opponent. And I think that's unlikely. Because it really doesn't actually feel like there's bots on Pokemon TCG Live in the same way that there might be in other games. More so because you can identify a new user to the game nearly immediately because they play the same fucking Arcanine EX deck, which is just, I don't know, the thing that you load in with. We all started there. That's where I started. And it's like maybe has a Charizard, sometimes has an Arceus in it, and then it's just bad, and you just roll over them really easy because they just don't have any resources to be able to play the game, really. And that's, you're like, okay, you got me. You died on the 3rd turn to my, 3rd Dragon Ball attack or whatever. GG, I guess. This is really fun and interactive. And then you kind of move on, and then you play against the real deck. Or lately, there's like 1,000 people playing the EV's deck because online it's so much easier to get access to those cards and stuff like that. But I don't think it's rigged. I put a lot of hours in a Pokemon TCG Live, mostly because it's just a great second monitor activity. My opponent always runs way more of the clock than me. I don't know why Pokemon TCG has such a fucking problem with timing. No game ever completes. Every game's a tie. It does my head in. And when it's a second monitor activity and I can watch them grind it down to 0 while I still have 60 minutes remaining, I can be fiddling with a YouTube video or doom scrolling somewhere instead of worrying about it. But look, that's my take. That's my first-hand experience in dealing with it, and as a person who has some understanding as to what the company would be motivated to do to you as a player. And I think Pokemon TCG Live is like a weird exception here. I think they're more, I don't know, focused on solving bugs that they have, because they have a lot of bugs in the game still. How the fuck am I supposed to put 60 damage from a Dragapult on something? I don't know what they've done, but they've changed it so it's impossible for me to do an exact split how I want it. We've had plenty of crashes. There's a bug that keeps coming back of the you just cannot select the thing that you want out of your deck when you're searching for something, which is just an instant concede most of the time. And it's like, well, what really benefit do they get from trapping me in hell queue, basically? And I don't take ranked very seriously on either thing. I think that's maybe the way to do it, but it doesn't feel the same way. I think the company sentiment is different. I think that the incentive is different because they're not making money in the same way, and so maybe it's based. Maybe it's actually fine. But like I said, as a game designer, it pays to pay attention to these kind of things. And there's so many states of a game, especially Magic, especially Pokemon TCG, where you can't do something. You can't do anything. You're like, well, I have no possible actions. I have to pass the turn and spectate my opponent playing the game. And so as a game designer, you need to look at systems to prevent this from happening. Because that's my greatest frustration with Pokemon TCG. Card advantage and searching through your deck is really clunky sometimes. Because sometimes you just need something really specific, and you can't really get there. Most of the decks that I'm playing like 20 setup cards. I'm still struggling to set up. I played a Gardevoir deck that had 4 Buddy Poffin, 4 Nest Ball, 4 Arven, 4 Colress, right? Colress goes and gets Town Store, which gets TM Evolution and gets me a Psychic Energy so that I can TM Evolution going second. Arven gets me Poffin if I have Energy in hand ready, otherwise it gets me Earthen Vessel, and then it gets TM Evo. And then the whole idea is that I would be able to TM Evo going second on my first turn every game. That's why I'm committing so many cards to it. I played in a tournament which had 5-6 rounds or something like that. Guess how many times I got to TM Evo on the second turn going first? Goose egg, that's right. And it can just happen like that, but sometimes you're like, well, why am I investing all these cards if this thing is never going to happen? Maybe systems need to be designed. And like Lorcana is a good example where Lorcana is like, well, pretty much everything can be ink for the most part. And then what you're choosing to be ink is going to be really relevant. And then how you're going to be, using your cards in that way helps solve the land problem. But it's just something to be mindful of the future. If there is a lever that, a company is used to incentivize for you to lose the game, that's something as a game designer you actually want to be pushing in the other direction to create fun games, because in my opinion, a fun game is way more likely to get me to keep coming back and keep playing it. Like, when was the last time Northern Lion played a AAA thing and he's off playing some goofy shit just because it has a high fun factor, rather than actually being trapped in the elo hell, rather than being incentivized by the game design to continue coming back and spending money? He's just searching for joy, and I think that's what we should all be doing. Just searching for joy when it comes to playing games and when it comes to making games. Hopefully that gave you, some perspective about how I feel about conspiracy theories and maybe some of the conspiracy theories that exist. I like to come on here and talk about this kind of stuff from time to time because game design is kind of the point of the channel. And if you're interested in game design, board game design, and that kind of stuff, maybe stick around. Maybe hit that subscribe button and you can kind of see some of the other stuff that I've been working on. I've been making board games literally on the channel so you can see the whole process recently, and I think that might be fun to come and check out as well. Otherwise, you can just go ahead and type "get good" in the comments. Or if you have any conspiracy theories of your own, I love hearing them. I think they're all fantastic. Some people come up with the craziest shit, and then you play the game and you're like, hang on, is bro cooking? Is this real? So hit me with your favorite conspiracy theory, and then maybe I'll see you around.